What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So I recently put up a post on Instagram all around why French contrast training is dead. So what I mean by this is it's now coming to light that really French contrast training isn't truly doing what we hope for it to be doing. The idea behind French contrast was to stimulate the dynamic components of movement, whether it is a plyometric, whether it's a jumping action, it could even be a sprinting modality. And we are looking to, in inverted commas, kind of potentiate that movement by using either a heavy lift, an overcoming isometric, or something that is going to give us a large stimulus for the muscle fibers and how they work contractively. So where I think French contrast training falls short is truly in the use of the velocity end of the spectrum of movements. So we're using something that is overload over a long period of time, like a heavy strength movement. But when we are searching for those high-end velocity movements, people are using things like band-assisted jumps. They're using methods where they are chasing velocity, but actually taking away the overload component to it. Because in the true force velocity curve, it shows us that when we move things at speed in the weight room, the force drops off. But actually, when we look at true locomotive movement, we really want to chase high velocity movements because there is extremely high overloads that come with that. So where I think this should go is actually we use a heavy strength movement, but actually we hit that with a really highly stimulating plyometric movement or even a sprint that actually carries high velocity but really high overload to match that. Now there are other ways as well that we can augment different forms of movements at velocity. We can go purely on the speed end of things with regards to velocity and look at using something like max velocity sprinting. Max velocity sprinting will be still relatively high with regards to loading. It could be 5, even 6 times body weight, but we have it done in a very, very short amount of time. Ultimately, when we're doing a plyometric movement, it tends to trend to the more time we spend on the ground, the higher that overload is and the higher the impulse that comes with it. And it's normally skewed by things like, well, let's do a bound for speed. A bound for speed because there still is an emphasis to carry displacement and travel with distance, but we're still trying to do it as fast as possible. That's going to be a step up from maybe max velocity sprinting. A step up from there would be maybe something like bounds or hops for distance, where the speed isn't as critical, but we're still hoping to travel as far as we possibly can. And then the tier above that would then be movements with a vertical emphasis. The likelihood with vertical emphasis based movements is the ground contact time lengthens because we're trying to ultimately convert horizontal into vertical momentum. And that's going to take a high braking force there. And it's ultimately going to give us a really high overloaded movement, but still in a relatively short amount of time with regards to what we look at with heavy strength movements. So that's how I would augment my different forms of movement at velocity. And I think it's really valuable for us to then be able to chase these as we move through our programming. In the Instagram post, I also put that you could use what would be classed as a true contrast. You could use a specific movement to prep you for the thing that you're trying to train. So let's say that we want to use a more higher overloaded movement. So we're kind of looking to super maximally load a specific plyometric or dynamic movement. So you might use a hop for height. It is extremely intense on the body, carries a lot of overload, still relatively fast, but we're going to prime that for bounds at as much speed as possible. This would be a great way then to make the bounds for speed feel really quite easy on the body because we're not trying to create as much force as possible. We're realistically just trying to continue momentum as fast as we can and get off that foot with as much velocity as possible. So that could be your true contrasted method. I also put forth a deep contrasted method. You could use Ply's deep tier system to start with an oscillatory based movement and bounce in there and actually really push to those ranges where you feel a little bit of inhibition. Then we add overload there and we do a full deep tier movement where you're completely landing and taking off in that action, and then you move to heavy strength stuff. It's a different way of attacking it, but could be a great contrasting method for you to use. Amongst all the problems that I think that we see with French contrast training, ultimately, I think the best way for us to potentiate ourselves is to build up gradually over time. That's why the plus plyo system is the best in that with regards to dynamic movement. We're going to use a light tier movement or rudimentary landings. We're going to build it up to sub-maximal movements, and then we're going to chase maximal intense-based actions. Whether it is ping tier plyometrics, whether it is max velocity sprinting, you hope to build up the stimulus over time, and ultimately that is going to prep you best for whatever you're trying to specifically train within that session. If you want to use a few methods that go super maximally past it, you can use that true contrast method that we spoke about just a minute ago. But ultimately, we build it up, we hit that, and we move on. So French contrast might not really be dead. People are going to continue to use it, but ultimately we want to educate people on the way that they use the velocity end of movements. People like Will Rattel have pointed out that you might as well just go away and just train these things separately. As I mentioned, use a build-up method, standard way to warm up for these training methods, and you will probably get a lot better at them if you do them over long periods of time. So, have a play with some of the contrast that I've given you there. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.